ATM Hotep. I want to say welcome to our Facebook live session this Wednesday. I know it's late. It's 11:36 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this is like pretty much an impromptu Facebook live session. Figure we go live just to kind of discuss some of the things that have recently come up in the Facebook group. So that's why we're broadcasting in the group. All right. So for those who are new to the group, Reni Wujao, my name is Wujao, and we have two others on the line with me, and maybe you all can introduce yourselves real quick.
Hotep, Reni, Imiket Aku. My name is Imiket Aku, and I'd like to welcome you today, those who are watching and those who are going to be watching later. Hotep.
ETM Hotep, Renee Sean. Thanks for tuning in this late night. Hopefully you guys appreciate the message we have for you today.
All right. And the message that we have for everyone today is that everyone's bank accounts, when you wake up, you're going to have $1 million in there. All right. All right. No. Yeah, we just wanted to quickly go over some of the things in the group, and Facebook Live seems to be a really good tool. You know, I know people use it for different reasons and things, you know, but it's a good way to kind of cover, especially in groups, you know, to cover different topics that are going on in particular groups and things, so we don't have to get long drawn out comments and things, because sometimes Facebook, they have the nested comments where you can reply to someone's comment within the comment, and then sometimes when you've come to a topic post, you'll miss those, but you'll see the regular comments, the root comments, and not the nested ones. And so sometimes it can get confusing, and people can mischaracterize or misconstrue what's being said and stuff like that. So Facebook Live offers an opportunity to kind of just have a good discussion about different issues, different topics. All right. So now tonight, we usually have Divine Words Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on our YouTube channel, the Seshew mdw-ntr YouTube channel. And if you haven't subscribed to it, please do so. Matter of fact, this is the YouTube channel. So yeah, subscribe to it so that you will be notified when we do have our live YouTube sessions. And then obviously on Facebook, I think people are already notified if you're a member of the group. So that's good. All right. Okay, but tonight we just wanted to go over a brief topic dealing with the functions of the different glyphs, you know, how the glyphs can function. And sometimes it could be a little confusing, and people may not understand how the glyphs work. And we tend to look at the glyphs, how the English characters that we use for English, which is the Roman script, how they function in relationship to the English language, and we kind of, you know, project that over onto the hieroglyphs, so what we know as Seshew mdw-ntr. All right, so to kind of start things off, we want to basically, well, I guess, Sunshan, if you will, you can probably read from the section that we were discussing earlier about the functions of the signs, and I'll just pass the microphone over to you.
We're doing. All right, so just to let you guys know what I'm reading from, it is our rebuttal book, Has the Egyptian Hieroglyphic Writing System Been Deciphered? You can pick that up on Amazon or at mdw-ntr.com. I'm on page 28 and 29, and it reads, hieroglyphics are pictorial or iconic in form. Visually on their own, each hieroglyph is a pictograph consisting of pictures, natural flora, fauna, and man-made objects indigenous of Nile Valley corridor, for instance, a water lily, an elephant, a lion, a crocodile, a giraffe, an owl, the ground plan of a simple house, an eye, or a pair of legs in motion. Each pictorial sign used to write a given word generally functions in one of the following roles: a logograph, phonograph, or determinative.
Okay. Dua, excellent. So what's showing on the screen is basically what you just said, and the emphasis is that well, first of all, what's being called hieroglyphs, we all should be familiar by now that the word hieroglyphs comes to us from the Greek hiero, and then glyphicus, which is sacred inscriptions. All right, now the words hieroglyph, the word hieratic, and the word demotic, they come to us by way of a individual named Clement of Alexandria, and those are pretty much misnomers on what those writing systems were. Indigenously, the writing system was called Seshew. All right, so if you hear us say Seshew, that's what we're referring to, the hieroglyphs. But we don't mind, interchanging either way, so that people can understand what we're talking about. All right, so the Seshew glyphs themselves, they are, as the brother Sean mentioned, they are pictorial, or they are pictographs. That's what they are, because all of them are depictions of things that were in the environment of the people of the Nile Valley. All right, whether it's man-made, whether it's flora, fauna, as he said. So that's what they are. But now how they function is a totally different thing. And this is something that people have to wrap their minds around, that the glyphs can function in one of three different ways in any particular given word. Okay, and as Sean read, one is as a logograph. Now on the screen we have number one. As a matter of fact, let me turn my cursor on. I believe you'll be able to follow the cursor. Go back to that. Okay. So number one, we have ideogram slash logogram, and there's a reason for that. But number two is a phonograph for a phonogram, and then three as a determinative. Now the reason why here it has ideogram and logogram is only because of the conventional use of those two words today by scholars. Some scholars use those words interchangeably, but technically they're not. Logograph is from the word logos, and graph, which is word writing, and then ideograph is from the word ideo, which means idea, and then grapho, to write. So idea writing and word writing, and then phonograph is sound writing. So scholars tend to kind of use those interchangeably, but technically they are different. All right, so we prefer to use logograph and then phonograph. And then determinatives. Determinatives describe how the glyphs are functioning in that role, because they help determine the semantic or the meaning of the word or the other glyphs that it's attached to. And the determinatives usually come at the end of a particular word. All right, so this is where it gets its moniker from, determinative. But what it actually is a pictograph, that's serving as an ideograph, because it has an idea of the concept, which shapes its semantic meaning in your mind of what this word is all about. All right, so this is something that has to be known, and people have to really, really wrap their mind around how the glyphs can function. All right, and because some people may not be familiar with that, we tend to look at the glyphs in their pictorial form that they are, but as if they're functioning pictorially. So we're looking at, let's just say, what's a good example? Give me an example. When y'all give me an example, what's a good example that people kind of confuse? Or I mean, you can take anything. And my mind is drawing a blank. Let me see. Let me just look at something. What's a good example?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
All right. I was saying that people tend to mistake the pictorial nature of the glyphs for it being used pictorially instead of it being used in these other functions that we just described. So, and we could take any of the glyphs. Let's just take a bee, the insect, the bee. And so, because we recognize this as an insect, the bee, like a bumblebee or a wasp, our minds, tend to lean towards interpreting as, or being expressed, the glyph expressing what we're looking at, not knowing that the actual glyph is used in one of three different ways, as we just explained. All right. So this is something that we have to understand, that people have to understand. And this is something that's very, very fundamental to your overall understanding of how the language and writing system works. Without this understanding, your trajectory is going to be completely off in your understanding of how the language works. All right. So this is a must to understand. All right. So now let me share another screen here. Okay, so basically, let me get this on the screen, my cursor on. All right, so now this is true. What you're looking at on the screen is true for just about every language. All right, when we say word, the notion of word, what constitutes a word, what is a word? We use that so casually. We say the word a lot, and we assume that we understand what a word is. And in any particular given language, you do understand what a word is because you grow up learning the language, speaking the language, and you're able to determine the boundaries of words, whether it's in its written form, like in English. The boundaries between words in its written form in English are spaces. We put spaces between words. In its spoken form, we can detect the certain gaps between words in a string of words when we're pronouncing sentences and so on and so forth. All right, and then we understand the word boundaries because this is something that we are conditioned from birth, and when we learn our language. Now this is true for languages around the world. But now, so what is a word? A word in itself consists of two parts, a minimum of two parts, two sides, if you want to describe it that way. Two sides of a coin, two sides of a sheet of paper, or just two sides. It has a concept and a sound pattern. If the form. Now, let me describe it this way. A word it consists of a meaning and a form. Now, the meaning is the concept, and this is something that takes place in your mind. So this is a psychological component. And then it has a form to it. Now, of the form, it can manifest in two ways. The form could be in the form of spoken or sound patterns, or the form can be in the form of written, where you're dealing with a language, writing system's orthography. All right. So it's two forms, two possible forms, spoken or written. All right. But in essence, it has every word has a meaning and form. Okay. Now this is important to understand because here we'll just go through an example. Let's take the word elephant. All right. The word elephant consists of the mental concept of an elephant, and it also contains the sound pattern of the word elephant. So when I pronounce the word elephant as a word, it recalls a mental concept that you have in your mind of an elephant. And usually that is a very large, dark gray animal with 4 legs, really big ears, and a long snout. So this is the mental concept that you have in your mind. And me pronouncing the word elephant to you, it will recall this concept. And the reason why is because this elephant, this word elephant, is a sign. And remember, a sign consists of two parts. And these signs are stored in our psyche, our mental lexicon, or our mental dictionary, for lack of a better word. And every one of us walks around with a mental dictionary. All right. And when groups of people walk around with a very high percentage of the same dictionary or vocabulary in their minds, then we can communicate with one another, and we will say that we're speaking the same language, because the understanding of language takes place in our mind. All right. And when that understanding or convention goes a little bit out of sync, then we'll have out of sync in terms of the sound patterns. Then we will refer to that roughly or generally as dialects. And then if it veers off even more, we will have differences in languages where two people won't be able to understand one another. So it's not mutually intelligible anymore. All right. So, but
Allow me to interrupt you a little bit, but I think because you just said something very important. I don't know if you can clarify on that a little bit. You say that the word elephant that you have your cursor on it is a sign, and I know that at this point we are dealing with sounds, and I know that for the most part we kind of have the assumption that signs only deal with written glyphs, or as in orthography, and not sound patterns. In that case, could you explain that a little bit?
yeah, a sign. Well, in signs in linguistics, sign has a different meaning than like the lay meaning of the word sign. We think of signs as a stop sign or things, road signs and things like that. But a sign is a unit that has two components. As I said, it has a duality, two sides of a coin, two sides sheets of paper, or whatever the case is. But a sign, as I'm saying, a sign consists of a mental concept and a form. All right. And it has something that what's called in linguistics as well as the signifier and that which is signified. So at the bottom, this will be the signifier, be it sound or something that's spoken, or be it something that's written. So it would be called the signifier. And then that which it signifies would be here, and it signifies something. All right. And then both of those together are married together to form a sign, whatever that sign is. All right. In this example, I'm using the sign for elephant. And the sign for elephant consists of two components. The mental concept of an elephant, as I said, we have the large animal, 4 legs, usually gray, dark gray in color, big ears, long snout. And then we have the sound pattern. This sound pattern or this form is English. We say elephant. All right. So all these are grouped together and come together. Now, the reason why we're able to communicate and understand one another is because each one of us walks around with a mental dictionary or mental vocabulary or mental lexicon. And these are things that we acquire through time and age as we grow and condition to within a certain speech community. All right. Now, just to kind of illustrate that further, if we look at the second example, this is another sign of elephant. The same mental concept of an elephant, which is of a large animal, 4 legs, dark gray, dark gray, long snout, big ears. But now the form or the signifier is different. It manifests differently. So here in Swahili, the form of this concept, the form that is married to this concept is pronounced, Emike, you can help me out here.
Ndovu.
All right. Can you say that one more time?
Ndovu.
All right. So that is the Swahili word for elephant, which would be, in English, would be elephant. And we have another word in Luo, or the Luo, and you can help me out here as well.
Lich.
All right. Now, both of these words are two different manifestations or forms that are attached to the exact same concept. So the sign has one side in common, but the other side is not in common. All right. And this And this phenomenon that you see here is how and why we're able to translate languages. All right, this is why a person that's a part of one speech community and another person of a different speech community, we can still communicate because one side of the sign is a match. All right, which is the meaning. The form is different, but the meaning matches. So therefore, because we have one side of it matching, we can do an equation. We can equate the other side, the form. We can figure it out, and this is what we would refer to as translation, roughly speaking. Translation is why ndovu is elephant, and I could say is elephant, but I'm saying is elephant because that's what it is in English. But ndovu is ndovu to a Swahili speaker. They don't explain it by way of a different language. All right. Now, so what does this all have to do with the functions of signs? All right, so now I'm going to go to the next picture here. So now we're dealing with Rani Kemet. And for those who may be new to, the word Rani Kemet, as we use the word Seshew, Rani Kemet is the indigenous word for, or indigenous name for the language of Kemet, or the Egyptian language. All right, so we say Rani Kemet, and some while others will say Egyptian. All right, and then sometimes you also see Chikam, and that is the Chiluba Bantu way of referring to the Egyptian language, Chikam. All right, so sometimes you'll hear us say Chikam or Rani Kemet. All right, but anyway, we are talking about the Egyptian language. All right. And actually, when we say Egyptian language, we're saying it in a singular, but there were actually multiple languages spoken in Egypt, but that's a whole nother conversation. All right. So what we have on the screen here now is we're applying the same thing that we showed in the previous example, except elephant. Now we're changing it to this word here. All right. So what you see on the screen is an open mouth and a single stroke. All right. This arrangement of these two glyphs stand for the concept, or contain the mental concept of a mouth, and then the sound pattern for the word mouth, which in the language of Rani Kemet would be ra. All right, ra, and it means mouth in English, but the form that it takes, or the signifier, would be ra, and it would attach itself, or it is attached to the concept of a mouth, and we all know what a mouth is, and this is what you're looking at here. All right, now the next example, we have a mouth again. Now in this example, this particular sign is free from the mental concept, which means that what happened is that these two sides of this sign are now severed. They're cut from one another, and this is what is represented in this bottom example. Now the mental concept is tossed to the side. The sound pattern for it is kept. So now this particular glyph, or this particular sign, is used for its consonantal value, but no longer for the mental concept of a mouth. So now we have cut the two sides of a sign, and we've done away with the one side and kept the other side, because now by doing this, now we can use this particular sign for its sound. In other words, so for example, the word ren, which means name. All right, it's spelled with the open mouth and a water ripple. I don't have it on the screen, but it's an open mouth and water ripple for the word ren, and it's transliterated as RN. So the mouth is no longer being used for its mental concept of a mouth. Now that has been tossed to the side, and it's only used and retained for its consonantal value. And we call that the rebus principle, where signs are used for its sound value and not the object in which it's a pictorial representation of. All right, and this is something that's very, very fundamental, and it's something that you have to understand at at a beginner's level of understanding the language, or else, again, like I said, your trajectory of learning the language will be way off. All right, and this is something that a lot of people will make errors in for a lack of this understanding. All right, and so now this brings us to this example. Now, earlier in the group, there's a conversation about the word Pope and its association with wisdom, the Lady of Wisdom, and things like that. Now, that's a different topic, but within the topic, the good sister Teresa, within the comments, and you can read it in the group. One of the comments was that one of the signs, which is a raised bread loaf, and it's the Gardner code X1, and this is what you see on the screen here, this raised bread loaf here, that this raised bread loaf is used in the word for father, and the word for father is it, and it's I don't have it on the screen, but it is actually, I showed it inside of the comments. I actually showed a picture of it inside the comments, so you can refer to that topic post in the comments, which has a reed leaf, this raised bread loaf, and then a horned viper, and then a kneeling man next to it as a determinative for the word father. And some people pronounce it yit, some people pronounce it it for father. And so because it has the bread loaf in there, it's being interpreted as being part of another concept of teaching, nursing, and things like that. So having that kind of thoughts on it or interpretation of it, that is void of everything that I explained about the rebus principle, where the mental concept of what you're looking at is detached from the sound that is attached to this same glyph. So the glyphs are used for its sound values, and this is what the brother Sean had read earlier, how every sign is a pictogram. It's a picture in nature, but it can function in 3 different ways. So what we're discussing are these signs being having a function of a phonograph or phonogram, sounds, not for the depictions of what they are. So in this particular example, we have the word 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of signs, or 4 sets of glyphs, not 4 sets, but 4 glyphs together for the word bread. And this represents the word te, which means bread. So when you see this word here, it contains the mental concept of bread, and then it will also have attached to it the sound pattern T, which means bread. So these are married together to form this sign. So when you see this will recall you recall both sides of this sign. Now this raised bread loaf can be used free from the mental concept of bread, and now only be used for its consonantal or sound value as a phonograph for the consonant T. And then because of this, now it frees up this sign to be used in any word that has that consonantal sound, T. So if I want to say mut for mother, I can use the bread loaf. If I want to say it for father, I can use the bread loaf in there. If I want to say moret for love or beloved, I can use the bread loaf. And notice that what's another word that has nothing whatsoever to do with father? Let's say the other word, met or mut, which means death or to die, the verb to die. That has the bread loaf in there. There's thousands of words in the language that are that make use of the bread loaf within its expression in the writing system. All right, so it's being used as a phonograph and no longer for the mental concept of a raised bread loaf. All right, so hopefully that's clear. And maybe Imiket, Sean, you might want to chime in and yeah, brother Asar Motep typed it in there, mut, which means death. Chiluba Fwa, I'm probably butchering up the pronunciation, but it means to die. So as we can see, the word for father, or even the word for bread, that also contains the raised bread loaf in its expression in the writing system. It has anything to do with death or to die. So and just to give an English analogy or example, English has 26 different characters. Now we use 26 characters to write all of the English words. So that means we're using only 26 characters in different combinations of each other to spell out in written form all of the words in English. So let's take the character R, the character we use for the sound R. If you look at all the words that character R is in there, it's thousands of words that have that character in there. But no one will say that all the words that have the letter R in it are related, genetically, which is linguistically, or conceptually, semantically, conceptually, whatever. Just because it has an R in it does not mean that it's related. So likewise with Rodney Kimmett and Seshew mdw-ntr, just because several different words have the same or share the same individual glyphs, it does not mean that these words are related in any form or fashion in terms of its concept or, genetically or etymologically, coming from the same root, etc., etc. All right. So we have to understand that, and we can't make the mistake of, ignoring that and moving forward from there. So anyway, that's pretty much it. I hope that's clear and or should be clear. Don't mean to make this a class, a class session. Just wanted to kind of go over this tidbit of information coming out of the earlier topic post, at least a portion of it, because I'm not addressing the issue of Pope and things like that, but just the issue of the glyphs and why we need to be mindful of not making those errors or those mistakes. All right. So, also, Asar is saying now, I think it's in real time. I'm seeing it in real time. Yeah. He said, remember, each letter in English comes from a full word. For example, Aleph, which is from alpha, which is head, and we don't say head each time we write A. Exactly. That's another good example. We don't say that, And actually, in Rodney Kimmett, or in Seshew mdw-ntr, I should say, there are 24 consonants that would be the closest thing that we would consider an alphabet. Technically, it's not an alphabet. An alphabet has a different meaning in linguistics, but the closest thing that we would consider an alphabet would be what would be called monoliterals or uniliterals, which are glyphs that represent a single consonant. And there's 24 of those. And one of those in particular are doubled to create another consonant, which is we transliterate as Y. But individually it'll be 24 of those consonants. And each of those consonants actually come from a word, just as Asar said in as far as for English. But in Rodney Kimmett or Seshew mdw-ntr, the same thing. The owl. Let's just take the owl, which is Gardner code G17. It's used mostly for its consonantal value, which is what we would transliterate as the letter M, as in Mary. But the owl actually has a name within the language. The same thing for vulture, which will be Gardner code G1. And all of them. Like, for example, the what we would say the sh sound in English, like the word shoe, like the word shovel. In English, we will write that sound with two consonants side by side, the S and the H, to represent that singular sound. Sh. But in Rodney Kimmett, that single glyph would represent a single sound sh, but it has a name, she, which stands for a pool of water. All right, and then I could go on, but so the same thing in English that Asar is showing, where even these letters came from full words. The same thing takes place in Rodney Kemet and in the writing system as well. All right, so just kind of wanted to go over these tidbits, but I said that MC Iron Lung would not manifest today, but y'all have forced me to be MC Iron Lung again tonight. So Emiket and Sean, y'all have anything to add to it, or anything you all saw in the group?
No, you did an excellent job.
Yeah, that was excellent, and we definitely knew that that was not going to happen anyway. But yeah, that was good explanation, and just understanding how the glyphs of how Seshew meta work is very important. We didn't even touch on the biliterals and on the triliterals, my bad. And I think also we have a few quadliterals as well. And obviously, even in the biliterals, you find also the sound, the glyphs that actually have the phonograms that contain the consonant T as well. So this kind of gets complicated if if that one doesn't actually follow the correct method and all of that, because you're gonna find other places where the reasoning of how these things work is not just doesn't add up, or it's not consistent across the board. So there's still more other glyphs, and all of that, and just understanding them is pretty much vital. And I think you went through that very well today, and also understanding how words function, what is a word, because we kind of take that for granted.
Yeah, and see, that's a good point, and this is something that we take for granted and granted in everyday conversations and things like that. There's pretty much no need to really get under the hood of how languages work. So that's understood. But whenever you do take a scientific approach and you're trying to do research, and when it comes to languages, there are things that you must know. There's some fundamental requirements or prerequisites that you have to know so that you won't make mistakes. And a scientist's job is to do their best, or your best, to eliminate error. That's what it's all about, to try to eliminate error. So methods are followed, procedures are followed, tools are used, to reduce error to null. You don't want any error at all. So there are fundamental methodologies that we follow. So when we're dealing with language, we have to know what a word is, and we kind of take it for granted until you actually take on the study of what a word is. Like, I'm gonna give you a quick example. Let's say the word, what's a good word? Let's say the word call, C-A-L-L, call. Now, if I say call, or called, or calls, and calling. Now, the question is, are those all different words, or are those all different forms of the same word? And that's an interesting question. I mean, it sounds like common sense right now as I ask the question, but when you go about your day, everyday thinking, everyday talking, and things like that, we never really kind of contemplate on that. But the word call, calls, calling, called are different forms of the same word. And in linguistics, once you take on that study, you will have to know the difference between what's a lexeme and then the surface word form. And so there's a relationship between what the lexeme is and what it manifests as, or what it is realized as in its word form that is actually used in a sentence. So this is the relationship between call as a lexeme versus call as a word form versus called, which is past tense, and calling, which is present, or what they call a gerund or infinitive, and calls, which has the S on there to denote third person verbal agreement with the third person. Calls, like he calls or she calls. I can't say I calls you. I would say I call you. But I would say he or she calls you. I had to add an S on there to have the agreement. But the point being that what constitutes a word, we kind of take it for granted. Now, another difference is if I say caller. Now we have a different situation going on, because we have the verb call and its different forms, which we call conjugation or whatever. Now if I say caller, now we have changed the actual class of the word. So it went from a verb now to a noun, which is an agent that does the verb. So now caller is one who calls, or one who called, or et cetera, et cetera. Now we have a different word. So these little things are, they're taken for granted, and two, they get very intricate when you lift up the hood and you dig into all these different issues dealing with linguistics and how languages work and how they're described and how they're analyzed. All right. So now, not to be intimidating, when you're studying Rani Kemet or ancient Egyptian, you don't have to know all of that, the type of things I was just explaining, but there are fundamentals, there are some prerequisites, some information that you have to know, and that's what we were discussing earlier, how different signs are function, and it would help if you learn about different aspects of words, which the building blocks of words deals with morphology, and then how they're used in a sentence and sentence structure and so on will be the syntax, and both of those together would be the grammar. And this is something that a person who is on the journey of learning the language will eventually have to learn, because you really don't know a language until you know how the language works by way of its rules, its morphological rules and its syntactic rules, which both comprise of its grammar. All right, so this is something that we all will have to learn, if we want to say that we are learning the language. You can't learn a language and not learn its morphology and syntax or grammar.
Right. Yeah, and it's actually the whole thing about language. When you're dealing with language, you're dealing with an agreed consensus. So in that sense, the minute you're actually studying language, you're dealing with something that entails rules in a way. So obviously you're going to have to learn rules, and like you say, all these things when you're dealing with Rani Kemet and all of that, then you have to kind of learn the basics, because for example, if you're dealing with English, you'll have to learn the basics of English and its grammar. When you're dealing with some other different African languages, they also have a different set of rules. Words will not look as the same word. The way the words are formed will be different from the language that you're used to, if it's English, compared to that. So you're not going to take what you know in this particular language and place it into a different language. You're going to have to learn the rules within that language as well.
Exactly. That's a good point. I don't know if you all can see my screen switched over. Just briefly, I know this is kind of off the subject, but just kind of build on what we were just talking about. Within a language, you have morphology, and morphology can be divided into two sides or two components, which deals with inflection. Now, mind you, morphology deals with the eternal structure or the internal structure of words. All right. And syntax, because a lot of people will hear morphology and syntax used, kind of together or in the same discussion. Syntax deals with the external inventory of words, basically how word order and things like that. But in morphology, dealing with words, we have inflection and word formation. And what I was discussing when I gave the example of the difference between the group of word forms such as call, calls, calling, called, all of those are verbs, different forms of the verb call. But then when I said caller, now I'm changing the class from a verb to a noun, and this will be a form of word formation of derivation. When a word is derived, a noun is derived from a verb. By adding in English, we would add the er, and sometimes we would add an or, like doctor, or depending on the consonant we add an er or or and so on and so forth. Educator, from educate becomes a person who educates, or the agent or the person who educates becomes an educator. And I believe that's an or as opposed to teach, the verb to teach, and then we have an agent who teaches will become a teacher, and that would be an er and so on and so forth. So just want to kind of show that. But I think my screen is frozen. But anyway, yeah, I don't want to keep this long, but I'm trying to see if any of the comments. I see we have a couple people watching. So that Lisa, you had any any questions? Put people on the spot now.
Questions or comments? Oh.
Yeah, questions or comments. You know, actually, I wish the sister Teresa was available and came in. You know, like I said, this is impromptu. We just came on live, so it wasn't planned. So I definitely understand if people aren't watching, people aren't available. But like I said, it's not to address the topic that the sister posted, but just one of the comments or a couple of the comments within the topic as it relates to the glyphs and how they function. All right, but that's another topic of, the word Pope being connected to the Lady of Wisdom and paper, like Papa. Papa giving us Pope, meaning father, and then how it ties into papyrus and things like that. That's another discussion, and we pretty much commented on there. We can have that discussion another time. But if y'all don't have anything else, we can close it out. Hang out. It's Wednesday. It's 12:23. We got some vampires.
Right. I thought sleep was for the week. Right.
Yeah, sleep. There you go. Sleep is for the week. Sleep is for the week.
No, but hey, that's good. Because just and not even regarding the topic that was on the Facebook pages, because we also get all these other comments or claims that people throw around about I guess people assume that there's only the monoliterals is what people are using in the in mdw-ntr, and they've heard about all these other thousands of glyphs that exist, and how you're going to be using only this set of glyphs, and what about the rest? And I guess it's just understanding that all those glyphs work in different ways, and as you say, the monoliterals are the closest we get to the alphabet, but that doesn't mean that that's what people are working with alone or exclusively,
right?
And they function differently. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's just important. And these are fundamental concepts that you have to wrap your mind around and grasp and fully understand at a very early stage of learning the language. This is different. The relationship between the writing system of Seshew mdw-ntr and the language it graphically represents, which is Rani Kemet, is a different relationship than we have for English and its writing system that we also call English, but it's really the Roman script, coming from the Latin or Roman script. Their relationships are different. They behave differently, and this is something we have to understand. So we can't project one relationship on top of the other. We just can't do that, or else we'll miss the target. All right, so just kind of want to emphasize that tonight, and nothing too deep. And like I said, it's not a class, but just want to kind of come on live and discuss that a little bit. And it's going to be obviously Facebook is going to record this and people will be able to watch it. All right, so we don't want to make it too lengthy and everything. So anything last minute, because I'm done. MC Iron Lung has definitely retired for the night, so I'm going tuck him away.
Nah, Shimmy Hotep.
Before you say Shemem Hotep, Sean, why don't you promote the book a little bit? I know you were talking about the book, and because you read from it, because most of the you're talking about, how really essential it is, and
Right.
what it is inside. So maybe you might go and plug it in.
Oh yeah. Remember, we did put together a rebuttal book That was a pre-debate book that we worked on, um, that you actually can get on Amazon, or you can get it on mdw-ntr.com. You can look into the shopping area, and you should be able to get that, as well as the introduction, which is the beginner book to Sable's beginner's book for Introduction to mdw-ntr, which is the book for Sable. So you want to get that. You want to get also our hieroglyphic book, which is has the Egyptian hieroglyphic writing system been deciphered? It's a rebuttal to Walter Williams. And you can get both of those books on either Amazon or mdw-ntr.com. And really, the rebuttal book is a good book. A lot of people say, from the perspective of gaining some knowledge about going into the direction of really learning Seshew mdw-ntr. So I would recommend that book, as well as getting the intro book and signing up for the class.
All
All
right.
right.
Just real quick, I'll just share the screen. Um, Gotta plug the book, and I also see. I like to you know, because some people ask, you know, when they hear us talk about it, then they'll hear us mention books, and they'll say, you know, where can we get it and things. So this is where there's hopefully, can you see it on the screen? Yeah. So
Two.
that's the right. This is the Amazon Amazon website where you can purchase the book. This the Beginner's Introduction to mdw-ntr, and also what I suggest that you also get. Let me put in the other one. This is let me see. This particular book, which is the book that Sean read out of, is called "Has the Egyptian Hieroglyphic Writing System Been Deciphered? A Rebuttal to Walter Williams." And this is the Amazon page to get that. It's written by the Seshew mdw-ntr, which is a collective group effort, endeavor, project. And also another book. Let me type in Asar's name. And he's going to have a list.
Yeah.
Okay.
So many
See,
Amazon don't want to pull it up.
yeah, he got so many books. He has like so many books. All right, and this is the brother Asar Motep's latest work called Nisudbiti in Ancient Egyptian, or King in Ancient Egyptian, a lesson in paronymy and leadership. All right, so that's also available on Amazon as well. Now, this particular book, Asar's book, is a very good book when you definitely want to get under the hood of linguistics and start to understand the comparative method, the historical comparative method of linguistics. All right, so and Asar's done an excellent job to break it down. Now it is technical, but at the same time, it's you can follow it. You have to take some time with it. Now, the first part of the book is really giving a good summary of another work, monumental work, as I say, monumental work, pioneering work of Jean-Claude Mboli, which is The Origin of African Languages. That's the title in English, but the book is actually written in French. And so what Asar did in the first portion of his book, this book here, is he gives a nice, good breakdown and summary of that process and explaining that. So it's really good, because if you're handicapped and not able to read French, and then this is definitely a good substitute, a very, very good substitute for that. Now, I wouldn't say a substitute, because Jean-Claude Mboli's book is over 630 pages long, and Asar basically did a good summary of it. But now that particular book is highly technical. Even if it was in English, you had to really, really strap yourself in and go along for the ride and really, really study. All right. So it's something very serious. It's a science, just like chemistry, just like physics, astrophysics. You don't expect to just read a couple of things and speed read and just say, hey, okay, I got it. No, it's not like that. Linguistics is a science that I think a lot of people sleep on or take for granted. Because you know what, one of the things is language. Because we use language and we speak and we communicate, this is something that we do every day, all day. Now, what we don't do, we don't practice astrophysics every day, all day, to the point where we make that distinction. Chemistry. Now we can argue that we perform chemistry every day in some form or fashion, but we don't distinctly do it. Our form of chemistry is really, really surface. We'll make Kool-Aid. That's chemistry. Or take a frozen drink and adding water to it or sugar, whatever the case is. That is a form of chemistry, so to speak. But in terms of molecular bonds and all the things, the periodic table and things like that, we don't deal with that every day. So the things we don't deal with every day is out of sight, out of mind. We tend to take it for granted. And so with language, though, because we do it every day, people kind of look at language or linguistics as a scientific endeavor that has a lot of different sub branches to it. We tend to kind of look at it in passing and don't think of it as something that is very, very serious. And it is. It is very, very serious and very, very helpful. But anyway, I don't want to be too long-winded, so I wanted to kind of show that book. So we have this book, Beginner's Introduction to mdw-ntr. Also, Dr. Riketti Amin here, called Majat Wafa, Conversation Book of English to mdw-ntr, which is an excellent book in terms of starting the process of reviving the language in terms of getting used to pronouncing and using and speaking the language. Now this book is written with the understanding that today's pronunciations, sometimes referred to as classroom pronunciations. Some people say Egyptology speaks. Some people say Egyptolese. Whatever the case is, we understand that the pronunciations are purely conventional. These are conventional pronunciations that we use to communicate, and we know what we're talking about. We know the meanings behind them. But there's a larger project underway to do the best job to recover the historical pronunciations, as best as possible. But this is an excellent book to start using it, so we can start actually using phrases like, what is your name? Peterenek, Rini Wujao, my name is Wujao, Kikerek, or Nejkarek, how are you? And you say, Nefraku, I'm well. So on and so forth. Tim Hotep, welcome in peace. Shimim Hotep, see you later. Gare Nefir, good night. Becca Nefir, good morning. Mashiru Nefir, good afternoon. Things like that. So this is an excellent book to stretch our uses. But obviously you're going to need somebody to talk to. So if you buy one, buy another book, send it to someone, then you all can use it. All right. So what else? What other books we got going on here? Another book. Let's see. It's another recent book that's put out by Brother Uncle Keck called The Chronology of Human Evolution, The African History of Human Origins. Now, this is a little different than the language or anything, but just wanted to push this book to you all, because some people ask about books that are written by, members of the Amun-Ra Squad or different affiliate groups with the Amun-Ra Squad. All right, so anyway, let me come out of this, because like I said, I end up being long-winded anyway. Can't help myself. All right, so no closing. Nothing else. We're done. We said grabbing that one. Diamond Shabaka Taseti. All right. Yeah. Make sure you support.
Yes.
It's important.
Wait.
Just one quick thing. I show these books, and I could show more. And every now and then I'll do my best to promote books, because people don't understand that to write a book, it's a tough job to write a book, and it takes time. And a lot of people who are writing books, they're not making a career out of it. Like, you're not getting rich off of writing a book. A lot of people are in school and working a job and writing a book at the same, all at the same time. And so people have to live, and everything like that. So it's good to support, especially if you're interested in a topic. But support, get the book, encourage other people to get the book, buy a book for a friend, gifts, whatever, giveaways, whatever the case is. But it's important to support, and it's good to support good scholarship, and by supporting, you will help the next project and the next project. Like me right now, I'm currently working on finishing up Ronnie Kemet grammar, where I'm doing a synchronic description of what I'm calling older Egyptian, because I'm doing my best to kind of couple together old Egyptian and what they call Middle Egyptian, because there are very little differences, and I'm noting those differences, but older Egyptian. So I'm doing a description of that, of how the language is as it exists, and attested in literature itself. So that's my next project, and I hope to be finished soon with that. But supporting work that's already out there helps free up some time so that more projects can be done, and more resources, because research, this is not something where we're just sitting in a room pulling things out of the sky. We have to buy tons of books just to read what the scholarly consensus are on different issues, and whether different research questions that we may have already been answered, and what those methods were, and whether we can develop more superior methods to eliminate more errors. And may have new findings and add to the body of knowledge. All these things are have to be taken into consideration, and this is what what we do and what we would like to do. So the support is definitely appreciated, and it's there for a reason. So that's why I always try my best to promote everyone's book that I consider colleagues, people that I know, friends, and so on and so forth, because it's kind of tough out there, to do this kind of stuff. Unlike some people get grants, they get grants and get a whole salary, and then they can free up the time and sit there and research, and they have the tools necessary, all the resources, and they write what they write. We don't. We're going against the grain, because a lot of things that we are finding out are reinterpretations of things that have already been treated on by decades old scholarship or books and things like that. So anyway, keep that in mind. But I'm sorry, what were you gonna say, Emika?
Oh, yes, when you're mentioning the books, I just wanted to include one of the other books. That was the book by Amen-Ra, the Amen-Ra Illumination Volume 1. So when you're on Amazon, include that also on, dip that in your basket as well.
Okay, what was the
And
title?
I know that
What was the title? I can pull it up right now just to show it.
the Amen-Ra Illumination Volume 1.
All right, let me. And I believe
Right
this
there at the
is
bottom.
it. Here, there we go. So the Amen-Ra Illumination Volume 1. Okay, got you. Focusing on honoring the ancestors, ancestor veneration, and the matriarchal spiritual system of Kemet. Ancient Egypt Volume 1. All right. Yeah. So, there's a lot of books. If you all saw my Amazon wish list, matter of fact, let me just make this clear right now. I have a birthday coming up, April 14th. I accept books. I accept electronics. Matter of fact, the Apple Mac Pro is like #1 on my list. But hey, I know that's a bit costly. But books, listen, if you want a copy of my Amazon wish list, I'll be happy to give it to you. and I will greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate any contributions that you may have towards my Amazon wish list. So just want to put
We're
that,
accepting Bitcoins as well. So
yeah, just want to put that out there. I know a couple people can appreciate uh, that plug, but anyway, so uh, just kind of want to close out because we up here hanging out as if it's Friday. Maybe Friday we could do this again. We could hang out. Yeah. So anything else? See, every time I ask y'all anything else, and then my mind is running. I need to just shut down. So go ahead. Let me mute my mic.
oh yeah, he kind of caught up to us, Sean. So anyway,
Right.
well, okay. So since I don't think there's any more questions or statements or whatever on the chat, so we'll just go ahead and close it out. You want to close it out, Sean?
Hold on. Let me address Tony real quick. Tony said the Mac is whack. All right. So first of all, the Mac is not whack. All right. The Mac is not whack. Now matter of fact, we're gonna have a debate about the Mac. So I'm even gonna take the time to do it now, but we're gonna debate about the Mac. All right, because you talking to a Mac. I think Apple should pay me as much as I promote Apple products. But anyway, all right. So yeah, y'all close it out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, and Sean, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and appreciate those that hung out with us this long. I know we went over an hour. We were expecting to only be about 20 minutes. But hopefully we all learned something here, and we can build on what we learned in the future. So with that being said, get the books, buy the books, invest in your education, and never stop learning. And on that note, Shimim Hotep.